Hello there, I'm Lloyd Evans. Welcome to The Bunker. It's time for another interview. Those of you who follow my channel closely will know that I recently interviewed NXIVM survivor Sarah Edmondson. I now have the privilege of speaking to her husband and co-host on the A Little Bit Culty podcast, Anthony Ames, aka Nippy. Nippy, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Good intro.
Thanks. So, well, you know all about intros, of course, because you are a podcast co-host, and obviously the podcast is kind of part of your healing process. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, I would say yes, but that's not really the impetus behind it per se. I guess technically we're always going to be healing from this. But I don't necessarily feel, I'm still injured per se. I don't feel traumatized by it like I did the first 6 months to a year afterwards, mostly because of the scrutiny that we were under, not so much for the stuff that was done to us in the cult. I felt reconciling, being conned, which was really kind of, in my personal case, my own personal recognizing that I'd been duped was the hard thing. Because for me personally, with the crimes and the violations of people's privacy and stuff, I wasn't targeted in the same way a lot of the people that were abused the most. So the reconciliation process, while still difficult, was different. And I don't think I was abused in the same manner that a lot of other people were, particularly the women that were in Keith's purview.
It's interesting you should say that, because one thing that kind of hit me more after I'd had my conversation with Sarah and just allowed myself to ruminate on it, it kind of hit me that her experience, and by extension yours, is fairly unique compared to that of perhaps my own and other people who are inside cults that aren't getting the same scrutiny and aren't getting the same action. I would imagine it's going to help enormously in your, healing and debriefing process when simultaneously to escaping, the group is under incredible scrutiny and feeling the pressure, the full pressure of, law enforcement, compared to a group like Jehovah's Witnesses, where it's like an open secret, the abusive stuff they're doing, and no one's taking any action.
And there's not the shame. There's societal standards that I think Sarah more so than me, because people tend to perceive her because she was successful within the hierarchy. For her to get out and thrive, certain people don't want to see that. I find that's indicative of a certain kind of person, more so than an indictment on the human team per se. And a lot of my trauma, if you will, was around the fact that this happened to my wife. And then I couldn't do really anything to protect her. I mean, we had ultimately ended up doing that. But there was a primal kind of release that I think if you're a husband, you're a father, or those certain things that I didn't really feel I got to do, and it's primal and it's human. And I gave myself space to really say I wanted to beat the shit out of that guy for what he did to my wife and what he did in the name of this altruistic thing. I had those emotions going on. And one of the reasons I was a little reluctant to, have my personal life really be other people's entertainment. It kind of felt like reality television. And I just balk at all that shit. I just wasn't interested in going down that route. And so I don't know, a lot of people that know me saw me on the Vow were like, yeah, I could tell that was hard for you. And one of my friends was joking. A lot of the cutaway shots were you just kind of going like this in the Vow. But I also felt like, this is my punch, so to speak. This is my way to set the record straight and tell the story so that it can be other people's wisdom, which was just always my push-pull and has been the entire time with this thing, because I don't want it to be something that's, perceived and and being totally self-serving, because that tends to undermine your message. And it was even, the decision to do a podcast around it at first rolled my eyes at it. I kind of felt like, look, you can Google the story and you can get the story. But then it was, I had some people talk to me about it and kind of said, look, this is what this can be. This is what it can be. And that seemed a natural extension and pivot of what Sarah and I had signed up for in the first place. And I said, what can this hurt? You do some episodes and it's done really, really well. We've reached far more people than we ever would have, and, doing what we thought we were doing. So that's kind of where it's led and where this whole thing is going on. And, I said no to everything, but the universe was kind of like kept on me with this. And I'm listening to those signs a little bit more and trying to just turn a negative into a positive, best I can.
Well, that's what it's all about. And what I keep trying to say to, ex-witnesses who perhaps say, what can I do activism wise? And, my response is always, well, if you feel like doing activism, fantastic, but don't feel as though that's what you have to do, because just getting out and, and living through that experience and going on and leading a productive life, that's your triumph, that's your victory, and that's more than many have achieved. However, when you have the ability to do activism, I think it's a really, touching gesture to actually, to a degree, go back in and try and help people, because by now you've, I'm sure, realized that it's not just about NXIVM, it's all of these various different groups like Jehovah's Witnesses, like Westboro Baptist Church, Moonies, you name it, where it's a different bodywork. That's how I describe it. It's a different bodywork, but the same machinery whirring away under the hood, And
to your point, the thing that I've been really just kind of pounding as my message, and the thing that I want to say is these are abuses of power, and that aren't proprietary to cults. They're not proprietary to Jehovah's Witness. They're not proprietary to the Moonies. They go on in your governments. They go on in the corporations that you may support. I had a friend, this happened, sat down, had lunch with him, and I was still kind of in my, my pinwheel, figuring out what happened. And he goes, look, I had $3 million and a guy came to me about an investment, and I gave him a third of my life savings. And he conned me out of it. He just can't, and I can't, there's no recourse for me. And it was a different kind of trauma and a different kind of being duped, but I almost went, that's worse in a lot of ways than what I just went through. I mean, money's money, but it's also like, that's years of effort that he went through. It's years of all these things that he thought he was gonna, and just the con itself, the process of the con and the abuse of the power goes on, and it goes on in a lot of other areas. And the reason ours got attention was because of the salacious nature of it. And for me, I think being responsible with the platform that I've somehow inadvertently gotten because of a bad decision, let's be honest, like I didn't make a good decision in something. It was a naive decision or whatever it was, whatever you want to call it. To be responsible for it, I think, is to articulate that it's an abuse of power that got us into it, and not do much more with it, in terms of activism, because I don't think activism should be the aim. It should be the effect of you having a story, or you having a wisdom. You see a lot of kids young now jumping on these activist groups, and a lot of them, it's a lot of hot air. I think, the best thing you could do is take care of what the things that are in front of you. And if you're able to do that, by happenstance, you may have a sphere of influence. And if you have a sphere of influence, you ought to reluctantly use that to help people. And people that you can tell when people are, it's self-serving and they're about power and those certain things, because ultimately the message that they're riding the coattails of will fail because they're using it to serve them as opposed to them serving the mission. And then whatever comes as an effect of that ought to be because your integrity, your character, and those things. And you have to have good people around you that are checking you. So, Sarah and I do a good job of checking. And I tell Sarah very difficult things that she doesn't want to hear. And she tells me the same thing, because I think that's staying in your lane, being as responsible as you can with your platform. And I think ultimately, each brick at a time, you will hopefully inspire and give people change or wisdom that they otherwise didn't have, that informs them to make good decisions. And if you can do that, then you're doing good work, and nobody can tell you differently. You're bulletproof to criticism somewhat, because you can just hear that's not what I'm doing.
Indeed. You have the podcast and you have the vow. And, full disclosure, I said this to Sarah, I'm coming into this as someone who knows a bit about NXIVM. I obviously know a lot more since speaking to Sarah, but who is mostly ignorant to, all the various facts about it.
Sometimes
and I haven't.
A lot of times those are the better interviews.
Indeed. Yeah. Well, that I think in a way that will help here. Yeah. And especially when it comes to the vow, I haven't watched it yet. And what Sarah said was, well, you should watch it and then have us back on the channel. And I think that would make a really cool video in the future if I can give you my reaction, in person. But what I'm interested in is, when you have the podcast, the whole point of a podcast is that you're kind of telling it like it is. With the vow, you're dramatizing a deeply traumatizing life experience. How did it feel like, in a way, trying to derive catharsis from acting? Obviously you and Sarah are very competent actors, but what did it feel like deriving your catharsis that way, rather than, say, sitting down and being interviewed and just explaining your story literally?
So we had a couple things that I would say we had going for us with regards to the vow. Because we had been approached by a lot of people to tell our story. And my gut was just like, with a lot of them, this is way more nuanced than what you're saying. You can tell by the questions that people ask. You can tell how they treat you. There's a little inauthenticity about like this. And, we got flown certain places to tell our story and pitch, like, we'll do 10 episodes, you'll get paid this. And it just wasn't like, I said, Sarah, we can't do anything for money. It's just not, this isn't something that you just cheapen with money and we'll just look, the wisdom gets diluted. Fortunately, we were in a situation where the film directors, Kareem Amir and Jahan Nugent, were very competent documentary filmmakers, Oscar nominated. And Jahan, they're a married couple. Jahan had taken our training in 2010. She had taken our 16-day training. So she knew what it was about. She loved it. She, obviously, peripherally, you're not going to see these. And she thought the concepts were great. She's very smart. And, when we were getting out, this is, June of 17, she wanted to get her husband, Kareem, to take a 5-day. And she called Mark Vicente, who was her friend, and I guess conduit to the organization. And he had just left, and he said, get out and run. And he kind of gave her a little bit of a download. This is before anything was public. And she said, why? And then he started to give her the information. And she said, the filmmaker in her said she put an iPhone on her and they started recording it. This is before I had gone in and left and done all that stuff. So by the time we got out, they had already kind of had something on camera. And they came to us while we were being bombarded with other stuff. And I could just tell that we were in hands that, first of all, we weren't going to compromise us with getting paid anything. So you can't say we're doing this for personal gain or whatever like that. Also, I knew that because she had taken the curriculum, she understood the appeal and the indoctrination, and she was going to, and the questions that she was asking indicated her understanding of that and her sensitivity to it and her capacity to tell the story in a responsible manner that doesn't just make people look like stupid fools, right? I knew that she was going to be willing to show it in a nuanced way, give the subjects dignity. And I think they achieved that really well, so that after you watch the first episode, I believe, some people were like, what's the problem with this organization? This looks great. This looks like fun. And we had extremely competent and successful people in it. And I think in a lot of ways, if you're seeking to understand it and how this can happen, they achieved in helping people understand that. Some people are just going to be like, everyone wants to think they're immune to these things. That's one of the things I've noticed. You can reveal a lot about people by the questions they ask and they respond, is they want to believe that this can never happen to them. And the irony with that kind of psychology, because I was that guy when I first did it, was it makes you a little bit more susceptible to it if you're not sensitive to how these things work. And we all get indoctrinated in some way. If you're extreme in your political beliefs, you've been indoctrinated somehow. So it's best to get sensitive to indoctrination and how those indoctrinations have a lot of people pulling levers and abusing their power to get you indoctrinated. And that's the wisdom I think that Sarah and I can take, put in sound bites so that people can understand and get sensitive to, how their minds are being mismanaged with extreme precision and skill.
So the fact that, you had a really good kind of director production team who weren't just in it to make a quick buck, they really wanted to explore this story. Presumably that helped with your catharsis, because
and they allowed us to paint a picture about how this going on right here is a microcosm of what might be going on in the macro, and hopefully people can watch it and take the micro related to the macro and have wisdom at the end of it, have content, not just, those are those dumb women who got branded with whatever. Like these things go on. People have been running into gunfire for hundreds of years, right? Under the name of some. So this can happen. And look, if you want to get sensitive to how these things work and understand how nuance works, this is where you may be able to get it. Maybe not. I don't, I'm not arrogant to say.
You've well and truly whet my appetite. Yeah. I will most certainly be watching it and then having you both back on and giving you my take, and cool. we can talk about it.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it, and I'd love to hear if it achieves that.
Indeed, I'm sure I'm sure it will be triggering. Yeah. Full disclosure, I kind of watch triggering material for my job because I make rebuttals to the Jehovah's Witness video propaganda that gets constantly churned out.
Yeah,
so
I watch some of it. Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to watch a different kind of triggering material, but I'm looking forward to it nonetheless. So, you've already kind of hinted a little bit as to how you first got involved. Can you kind of take us back in a time machine and show us what was your process, what was going on in your head when you first got involved?
So I had a girl I dated in high school, and we were out of touch, in touch, and I had run into her in New York City when I was living in New York City, and I still had feelings for her, and she was going through some stuff, I think a divorce at the time or something, and I was just kind of interested in her still. And her mother gave her a gift, like a training to help her, like a personal and professional development thing for her that she took. And I had been kind of in touch with her a little bit. And then when she took it, she came and tried to enroll me into it, to the point where I was like, I'm not doing your fucking cult. Like I even said that. It sounded just weird. And she was sensitive to me kind of, leveling it a little bit. And I didn't want to be that guy. And it was about a year and a half of me kind of being in touch with her, and then going, okay, I'll give it a shot. She said something to me after I'd just done a film and I was going to go see a friend in LA. And she's like, what are you going to just go out and party and get drunk? And I was like, yeah, that's right. Or do you want to work on yourself? And she got me. That comment got me, because I am the kind of dude who had like books on, I played sports in college. I was a quarterback in college, and I had books on how to be the best at whatever I wanted to do. I was, serious about things I committed to.
Were you a Nippy quarterback?
Yeah, I was. So that got me, that comment got me, right? And so I was like, all right, I'll go check it out. I went up there. It was weird. I told her, like, she told me, like, she preempted me. She was like, look, this is going to be weird at first. And I was like, all right. And she had told me her dad had done it at one point. And I respected her dad. Her dad's a brain surgeon, went to Yale, played football at Yale. So there's a guy I'd known since I was 15. There was just minds that I trusted that had seen what it was and had passed their kind of litmus test. So I was going on faith a little bit. I went in there and I paid like $2,000, which was a lot of money for me at 26, 27, right? It was, I wasn't making a lot of money. That was a lot of money for me. And it's still a lot of money.
It's a lot of money for me now, but yeah, cool.
For five. So you need to understand, it was like, I went up there like, hey, this better be fucking good. So I think that kind of preempted me to make it good on an unconscious level. But I did get some value out of it. Real cool stuff with goal setting, and then you got a coach at the end of the training. So I was like, okay, this isn't bad. And then I saw that the monthly courses were $300 a month. And I started doing the math of like, if I go out 4 times a month in New York City, I know I'm spending $100, right? So I said, I can not do that. And I can take this and invest in my goals and things that I want to do, right? So I decided to do that. And at the time, the only place you could do it was upstate New York. So it's a 2.5-hour train ride. So I would go from New York City to upstate New York, take classes Friday night, Saturday, and then come back Sunday. And after about a year of doing that peripherally, we tried to get a group of people trying to keep it in New York City, and it was floundering. This is 2001. And then about December of 2003, I just look at the organization as a whole, look at the leadership and go, this shit isn't going anywhere. You're never going to get Vanguard, sashes, and bowing to catch on anywhere. I liked the curriculum. I wasn't upset. I wasn't disenfranchised. I was just like, this isn't going to catch on. I've gotten what I want out of it. And I peaced out. I was deuces. I was like, cool. But I wasn't like, angry. I was just like, I'm not going to spearhead this. I'm 28. I've got other things going on. Love what you got me. If you have other curriculum, I might take it in the future, but it wasn't like I was upset. I thought it was weird. I didn't think it was going to catch on. And I didn't want to be the person to try and make Vanguard, sashes, and bowing cool. It just wasn't inspiring to me. So I quote, left the organization, but it just meant I wasn't involved anymore. And then I ended up living in LA for 2005 and 2006. I got cast in something out there. I was auditioning out there. And then the filmmaker, Mark Vicente, which you'll find all this out when you watch the doc, came out in 2006. I had actually done a training in January 2006. I went and took like a level 2 because I basically had like a goal plan. I wanted to come in, take a training for 5 days, get some coaching, get my goal plan set up. And I was just disciplined in that regard.
But you'd left saying, I'll come back if you come up with something new. So
was
there something new?
I'd get phone calls saying, hey, we got new curriculum. I was like, cool, maybe do it in a month, maybe do it in a year, whatever. And finally I had like enough money set aside to invest in myself again. Like that's how I wanted to do it. I didn't want to go into debt or anything like that. And when I was visiting for Christmas in New York City, my parents, I decided to go up first week of January, I think of 2006, something like that, take a training. And the organization was totally different. It had grown in Mexico, Monterey. It had grown. It had younger actors, directors, people that I could relate to, people that were in my field. It just felt like it had a more dynamic group. And in a lot of ways, I was eating my words. This isn't going to catch on. So I was like, okay, cool. Like I wasn't, I was wrong. I was like, great. This idea is catching on. This is good for the world. This is good for a lot of people, blah, blah, blah. And I meet Mark Vicente in it. We hit it off, just joking around, laughing. And then he comes out to LA, I think in August of September of 2006, and says, listen, I have a film project I'm working on. And we all were thinking of you to be in this film, but you would have to relocate to New York, upstate New York, in order to work on it. And I was like, okay. So they flew me out. They shipped my car, all expenses. They brought me back to upstate New York to work on this film, paid for my living, paid for my food, did all this stuff until about May of 2007, June of 2008, where the film, I actually got on a helicopter in Albany, New York, flew down the Hudson, and went to Bergdorf Goodman and got fitted for suits, got fitted for pre-production. I didn't have any reason to think this film wasn't going to happen. And I was like, cool, I'm here. There was the curriculum going on. I'd be in a training or two, but I really wasn't there for that. I was there for work, and I was going to shoot this film and go back to LA. Cut to later on, I'm like, all right, look, I don't want you guys paying for me anymore. I want to make this film. I'm going to leave or whatever. I was pissed because I was there for a couple months. Nothing like, and then Mark ended up working on another project. I'm like, look, you called me here. I was pissed. So long story short, I decided to stay in New York. And then I think in around the fall of 07, I can't remember, or New Year 08, they started building a center in New York City. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go back to New York City and start working on it then. And then I was back involved with the organization. And then more and more, I became a teacher and started teaching the curriculum, all the while thinking I was gonna be doing some work. And then eventually I was just in. And we were going, I was growing centers in Vancouver, LA, New York. And I kind of stopped auditioning a lot because I was traveling a lot, helping with trainings and stuff like that, but felt purposeful, felt it was doing well. And then I got really disenfranchised. I kind of took inventory of the organization, and that upswing that it felt like it had been experiencing, it kind of plateaued, and it didn't feel like this mission of what we were doing was really taking hold, and this whole changing the world thing was a bunch of bullshit.
If I could just drag you back to, when you go to New York to shoot a film, did that film never get made? Just to be clear. Okay. And because one thing that I learned through Sarah is that there's sort of a career, quote unquote, or there was sort of a career in NXIVM in a way that there isn't in perhaps other groups. Like in Jehovah's Witnesses,
it's hard, though.
if you're going to commit your time, you're not going to get paid for it. Bethel or staff members who are at the headquarters, they get like peanuts to cover their expenses. It's nothing that you could live off. So were you kind of partly at least thinking in terms of, well, if I'm not acting at the moment, I can at least be subsidizing myself in this way? I
decided to pursue a career path within the organization. Yes.
Right.
Probably around 2008, 2009.
Sure.
Yeah.
But around this time as well, you were also noticing that this initial kind of seeming progress wasn't quite what
that happened in probably 2011, 2012.
Oh, right. Okay.
It just became really difficult to enroll people, partly because of the media that was going on when you Googled Keith Raniere. It said that he was doing other things. Yet then it also said that he got the Dalai Lama and a lot of other people to support him. So what
was your reaction to the bad stories in the media, by the way, when people
the bad stuff that I saw, and this is the bad stuff that I saw, that was disenfranchised woman who said he had sex with them, that I went and spoke to the people around him and they said that she was lying. And these are people that I trusted more than the people that were leaving. The other bad stuff was the $65 million of the Bronfman money that he lost. Now, you couldn't have a conversation with Claire about anything that was contradictory, should I? And I didn't have much of a relationship with Claire Bronfman, one of the heiresses. So just so the viewers know, there's Claire and Sarah Bronfman. They were two sisters. They're heiress of the Seagram's fortune. And Keith lost $65 to $85 million of the money in the commodities. Now, I worked with Sarah directly in the New York City Center. She was the one that was, becoming the head, and I was working with her. And I had a conversation with one of our mutual friends that works with her, and he had the lowdown. And he said that it wasn't what was going on. I was saying in the media that didn't happen. And I had kind of a superficial conversation with Sarah about it because she's private. And rightfully so, like that, this is a delicate situation, but it's also on the back of the New York Post in the city that we're trying to grow this in. So it affects what I'm trying to build. And if this is true, then it affects my life and what I'm trying to do. And if there's bad behaviors, I need to know so I can peace out. So I ask her, I just say, are you okay? Are these things true? And she's like, if it doesn't bother me, it shouldn't bother you, something to that effect. And my finances aren't your business. And you know what? She's right. I couldn't argue with that, but I also felt like if you're not upset and you think this is a misunderstanding and it's $65 million, 99.9% of the planet will never see that much money. and you're okay with it, then I think there must be a misunderstanding, and it's on its way to a resolution. So I didn't press it, right? There's a lot of built-in things to not press, and I felt like, listen, if I lost $65 million and this jackass lost it, I'd be in there flipping my lid off. But if you're not, then I felt, okay, so I'm not going to go fight this fight for you. I just want to make sure you're okay. And it was that kind of thing. So it was enough for me to go, okay, I don't think anything's bad. This is a misunderstanding, because the person who is the victim of losing $65 million isn't outraged. And that was kind of my philosophy. So, and we had the Dalai Lama, we had other people that were endorsing us, and it felt like this is the adversity you experience when you try to put good out into the world, so to speak. So it was talked away, and then it was never brought up again. And then that was it. But ultimately, internally, I just felt like morale's low here, but it takes you a while to realize morale's low and get a sense of where it's coming from. So
is that woman still okay with losing $65 million?
No, I don't know. I haven't spoken to her, and I can't imagine that she is, knowing what she knows now. But
right.
Claire got sentenced to, I think, what was it, almost 7 years, and she doubled down on her support of Keith in front of the judge. So he had a grip on these people that he was abusing, and they're not able to own that they were being abused by him. So
I mean, that's just astonishing. I mean, you were telling earlier about a friend who was devastated at losing $1 million, devastated, and you were explaining how that would be a devastating experience. And now we're talking 65 million. Someone's not batting an eyelid, and I feel as though in microcosm that explains the extent of control that a group can have over your mind. You know?
Also, it speaks to if you're earning your own money too. If you earned your own 65 million, someone else.
That's another way of looking at it. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
All that said, I think the biggest thing there is if someone loses $65 million of your money and has a gaslighting story for it, and you're not sensitive to how he's abusing you, it speaks to the power of someone's pride in not recognizing their delusion, or the power of the con, and maybe both at the same time. It's a hard pivot to recognize you were conned and admit it, and admit that you were being abused. And if he was having sex with these women, which we can neither confirm or deny, but we seem to think that there's a pattern of him abusing them sexually under the guise that he's helping them. You have to reconcile that this guy was conning you and fucking you spiritually. And I don't know that these women are strong enough to go look in the mirror and do that. And that's a hard thing to do. I can't say, that's not a criticism. It's just a diagnosis from my perspective.
Indeed.
Because how does everyone else recognize they're abused, and the people closest to him deny everyone else's abuse and say this wasn't abuse, this was for growth and all that stuff? It just doesn't make sense.
So you were explaining how sort of 2008, 2009, you're starting to see this plateau, but you're already heavily involved. How did you come to be involved with Vancouver?
So Sarah and I started dating around 2011, and I started running a lot of the trainings and helping run the trainings in Vancouver and Los Angeles. But I was mostly stationed in New York, and then we got married in 2013, and then I started spending a majority of my time in Vancouver, where it was extremely successful out here. And I think it was successful in large part because Keith didn't have access to a lot of the people here, and people were treating it as a goals program. So the more fringe it was, not fringe, more peripheral you were to the epicenter, the more you were going to get what the quote unquote curriculum was offering, which is nothing unique. It was goal setting. It was NLP. It was all a hodgepodge of other things that were put together in a kind of interesting sort of fashion where you could facilitate awarenesses with people, and you could get that, and then people could show up. What I really loved about it, and this is what I really wanted to do when I first took the curriculum, was I wanted to take the goal setting aspects of it and bring it to athletes. I just thought having 15, 16-year-old kids who have talent but not a lot of direction. Having just a weekly check-in with someone would go a long way. And that's what I was ambitious to do. And I ended up doing that within the organization and running what was called the Goals Lab. And I would run like 2 or 3 of those a week. One in person, whatever city I was in, and then 2 that would be in another city. And that's what I really like to do. And I kind of found my niche in the organization of doing that. So that was fulfilling for me. And I still, I'm looking to do that in other areas. I'm working with another friend of mine in these football camps that he started. So I have a
And will you be using wisdom from NXIVM?
No, I mean, well, just my ability to hear what's going on with people.
Sure. Yeah.
And which I did for years, and volume of people and types of people. I got approached right when we were after by some people to come in and work in their company. I didn't do it because I didn't know what was going on legally, but I think I have some options in that capacity. If the time is right. COVID's limiting a lot of this stuff right now, so I'm just kind of wait and see. But that aspect of the curriculum I really loved. It was the thing that really drew me to it.
And was there anything else about NXIVM that you kind of look back on with fondness?
I really liked the energy that the Mexican community brought to, just the kind of happiness of the Mexican culture that they brought. I really felt like they breathed life into a lot of the things. And I miss kind of, some of those people, about a handful of them. Past that, the day-to-day of it, and not getting paid for work, I think, I've recognized on an open market could earn me a pretty good living. That kind of pisses me off a little bit. But there's not many people I miss. Like I kind of felt like I was forced to work with and be friends with people that I otherwise weren't my tribe. I miss about 5 to 10 people. And that's about it. Like I said, I was disenfranchised for a while. It was the thing that was difficult for me to leave is I didn't feel like, not being grounded in one city, and having a wife and eventually a kid limited me from finding anything else to pursue, which was really a weird kind of place to be the whole time. And I felt like I couldn't put my skill set into another market because most of my adult life had been in this cult that doesn't have any exchange or currency with other hierarchies of the real world. So the more you're out of the real world building this, the less you're building equity, I guess, so to speak, with other paradigms, and people just don't know what it is. Even though you might be extremely talented, what are your references? Who can vouch for that? In fact, if they look you up, you were in a cult that was branding people, so they might think something. So, there's a lot of that I've had to reconcile, overcome. And look, I wasn't particularly worried it was going to overcome. I just felt like that's a lot of time. It's a lot of time that I could have been building other things and been at a different place and had more to show for it. But ultimately, that's something that all of us are going to have to deal with that are involved with this organization.
You still feel resentment over that?
Just the time. Yeah. But again, look, everything worked out great. I mean, look, I'm not a big spiritual karma person, but if I take inventory on what's happened in the last 3 or 4 years, it's undeniable to me that there's something there to be said for it. Because we had the right people waiting for us when we were out to tell our story. We've had a lot of people, we had the right people. We made a lot of really good decisions in a short amount of time. And we weren't sure if those were good decisions when we were making them. We just kind of went with our gut. And we had a lot of help. And I think the goodwill that we received when we got out was goodwill that we had put in to the universe coming back. Because we helped a lot of people too. Like, you can say what you want about what happened in the organization, but like there's something to be said about going in at 7 a.m. and not going home to 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night until you've helped that person with that particular issue. And we did that. I did that. I was the first one there, last one there. And I went there for the reasons of helping people and understanding them and helping them understand themselves. So yeah, it might've been under, an ugly hierarchy or whatever you want, but I showed up with that in my psychology every day, and I don't begrudge. I don't have a problem with how I committed to something. It's just the thing that I was committing to was misguided, and I didn't know it. When I did, my integrity, Sarah's integrity, and a lot of people's integrity took it down. And then ultimately we were able to put it in the hands of law enforcement, who I was confident when they saw our integrity and theirs, they were going to see it for what it was. And this was taken down in a very short amount of time. We left in June of 17, and Keith Raniere was arrested in March of 18, when I thought we might be spending the next 5 to 10 years of our lives in litigation. So, for me, I have no complaints about how it was handled. I think it was handled efficiently. And I felt lucky to live in a country that had an infrastructure in place that if you can sound the alarm, they're like, we're on it. We got it. Now, the FBI and our law enforcement, as we know, isn't perfect, but managing hate and managing darkness is never going to be perfect, because sometimes, the hate is the people managing, the light, and, you don't know. So for me, it was, after a while, I was able to kind of take inventory and go, what I experienced was a dark versus light thing. It was a spiritual thing. I inadvertently got in the clutches of something dark. My light got in, and this is language I never used to use, so bear with me. My light got inadvertently tangled up with some dark. And when we got out of it, the real light was there. And then, we joined forces with that. And I think it's a victory in those spiritual terms. And I think as a result, I have a huge volume and a war chest of wisdom as to how these things operate. And I think I can detect it better. I'm not going to say, always, but I think I have wisdom.
I think there's a dimmer switch somewhere in that metaphor,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
definitely.
Feel free to add the dimmer switch.
Sure.
We're applicable. Yeah.
Now, obviously, when I interviewed Sarah, she explained, the whole thing with the branding, and what fascinated me was that, it wasn't instantaneous. It wasn't the branding itself. It was more the realization of what the symbol represented, and that was when everything started to unravel. You've given us a little bit of a whirlwind explanation, but talk me through that epiphany. Was it kind of like an instantaneous thing for you, where as soon as she divulged this, you were immediately on board? Was there a lag in terms of your willingness to support, or talk me through that?
When you watch The Vow, this question gets answered very clearly.
Okay.
I was apeshit. She told me over the phone she was afraid to tell me. She had Mark tell me. I told Sarah after, if you'd come back with a mark on your elbow of anything, I would have been in there and gone postal. There's a scene in The Vow, because I actually recorded when I went in and yelled at him. And I gave that to the FBI or the New York Times. And I said, my attitude was, if you're not going to do anything about this, I'm going to do something about this. And I'm very glad I didn't handle my problems with violence. It was very close, that I was going to go up there and do something. But I also recognized, number one, I don't want to be a person that handles this problem with violence. It just begets more violence and it leads to jail. And I'm no good to my wife and kid in jail. So that was the thing holding me back. And I think I actually say this in The Vow. It's like, if I didn't have a wife and kid, I'd be in jail right now. So there was no deliberation over the merits of branding someone's pubic area as a means to teach them discipline, honor, and character. There was no intellectual debate for me about that. That was very clear to me. And then that's when I started doing the reconciliation of like, oh my God, when he did this and did this, this is the kind of mind we're dealing with. We're dealing with a sociopath. And then I started educating myself on that. There's a lot of books. I mean, look, here's the thing. Here's the thing that was kind of embarrassing for me about the whole thing, is when I got this piece of information, I literally found books and YouTube videos on it that explained it, and just kind of went, oh my God. It was just the humiliation of being so conned and so duped, and the shame hit me all at once. So that was the hardest part. That was the lowest I think I went. If you look at emotions like shame and all that stuff, the low frequency emotions of all that stuff, I went there and I decided I'm not going to stay here long. So I need to figure out, I have a kid and there's other things, there's still, like, intellectually, I knew I was still in abundance and I knew this was going to be okay. And I still have things, everything going for me in my life. I just didn't feel that way internally. So I had to figure out, okay, how do you discipline your psychology? How do you get to a point where you can reconcile your mistake? Let really, what is it? What's the worst of it? Your ego, your vanity takes a beating. Like, so what? Like I can handle that. Like, that's not, and that's a time thing. That's not going to be, I've been there before. I've been humiliated before. I've been like, that's just emotions. And I don't say just emotions like that, but like those things can be reconciled, and those things can be reconciled by implementing certain disciplines, remembering what you're good at, remembering what you do. And I just felt like the same way it takes time to heal a hurt ankle is the same thing you need for your emotional scars. And I got more involved into understanding that, how to do that, how to do it with someone who's going through something worse than you. Right. And then talking about it all the time, then having it be international news, all those things. And then I figured out, like, okay, I'm going to do that and just really speak when I speak, be as emotionally honest as I can with myself and I'm possible. And do not use this story to serve you. You have to serve it. And those are just the kind of things that I kept in my mind is the best way to get out of this with my integrity, with my sanity, and someone my kids could be proud of someday for how I handled it. I don't think I did it 100%, but I think I did it enough where Sarah and I, we have done it enough. Sarah and I have emerged as people who can talk about it in sound bites that people can understand and get content and wisdom from. And as long as there's a demand or market for that, I'm willing to do it, but I also don't want it to be my life. I spoke with my dad about it and I was like, yeah, I'm not really interested in being cult guy. I don't want to make this my narrative in my life.
Although I would like to see the costume and the color combination of what cult guy would look like.
Yeah. I think I'm wearing it,
We need to pitch Marvel on that.
Yeah. Well, you just come in and bust cults. He's got to be super logical, right? He'd end up being logic guy, right?
He's got like a BS meter on his wrist or something. Yeah, definitely.
And he does it like they do at COVID. He puts it up to your head. Yeah. You get a little thing like, your BS meter is here. Have a seat. So that's kind of been my and I think in a lot of ways we're out of it, where Sarah and I are finding other things to thrive in. She's working more as an actor. I booked some stuff this year. I'm starting to do more stuff as an actor. I'm starting this other thing and coaching athletes. We had another kid through
Congratulations.
So it's been and we don't find ourselves talking about it much. We find ourselves talking about the normal problems that I think and gratitude that most couples have. And the only time we do is on our podcast, and if we seek it out on the internet. And I don't do that often. So
fantastic. Yeah, well, again, it's just so nice to see you both emerge on the other side of this quite traumatizing experience, so well-rounded and so frankly healed. And again, I can't help but think that it's the kind of intervention of society on your behalf that has gone quite some way to achieving that. If you'd gone to the FBI and the police and what have you, and they'd have been like arms folded, not really our thing.
They were.
Or if what I'm saying is, if they'd have just sat on it for years and years, and you were still here now, and Keith was going around doing his thing, and a free man, do you not think you might feel a bit differently?
I have told Sarah, if that were the case, I think I would have flown to Albany and I would have beat the shit out of him. And I don't say that like I'm almost embarrassed to say that. But if I'm totally honest, like my psychology was, you don't get away with this. You're not getting away with this. Not to me. Like if this is going to stop, I can't honestly say I wouldn't have used violence because I knew where he lived, you know, and, you know, I've got friends and I've got brothers and I've got a lot of people that disagree with that kind of shit. And I don't know that I can't like, and it's not even like being a tough guy. It's just like, if you guys aren't going to do your job, I'm going to go do it for you. And then I would have called the police and said, hey, I beat the shit out of this guy. Come arrest me. Like, that's kind of where I was in my psychology. I don't know that I'd have done that. I don't know that I would have been talked off the ledge. I don't know that I would have cooled off. I don't know, but you know, I'm just being totally honest. Like, you know, when I think about this scenario, right. And it went exactly how I think it could have gone. I don't know that it could have gone any better for us. I still think about an opportunity to beat his ass. And I know that lands me in jail. And I know that there's an itch there that I didn't feel like I got to kind of to do. And maybe that's just primal stuff that, you know, that when I let myself go there, I go there. Because I don't consider myself inherently particularly violent. I haven't thrown a punch since the late 90s, you know, and that was under alcohol influence and boys will be boys kind of stuff. So I don't consider myself that. But when it messes with my family and you do that stuff, I just kind of feel like, you know, I think every person's got a point where violence is the only solution. And I don't know. I'd like to say, you know, I'm better than that, but I don't know that I am.
Well, fortunately, again, you and Sarah were incredibly lucky in people who mattered taking your story seriously and taking very, very quick action, as you spelled out earlier.
Because I think people, you know, that hear that story and are outraged have the appropriate response. I had an outrage response. That is the appropriate response to this. And when you go down a road of intellectual debate over the merits of it, I'm not even, you know, we're not having a conversation. Your head fucked. This shit's not normal. It's not okay. I don't care if it's unconventional. You don't do it to me. You don't do it for an organization I'm working with. And I'm not bringing anyone near this guy if this is how it can end up for them. Friends, family, whatever. That's just, you know, and he's in jail for a reason. He's in jail for 120 years because he earned that. So, you know, I feel very firmly on that. And
justice has been served.
Yeah.
And we need to do a follow-up once I've watched The Vow, because
please, I'd love to.
I started our conversation.
Know what I'm talking about.
I started our conversation already anxious to watch it, and now I'm like, I'm putting it on the TV now. But no, let's get you back, and I'll give you my thoughts, and it'll be very, very interesting to recap with you both. Sure. Anthony, it's been an absolute pleasure and delight speaking to you. I think you and Sarah are doing wonderful work. Please continue it to the extent you feel able. And well done.
We will. Okay.
So viewers, I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lloyd Evans channel for more such videos. And as always, thank you for watching.